I know exactly what those families were going through. I know what it's like to get the call telling you the worst news you could ever imagine. And the pain of knowing that this was happening and again in our country to so many families was just too much to bear. Each person in that club was someone's child, a sibling, a lover, a friend. I wish I could say I'm surprised that we're here again, but sadly I'm not. And we will continue to be here again and again if our elected officials fail to take action that prevents dangerous and hateful people from getting their hands on a deadly weapon. It's time to disarm hate.
We've seen this before. To some, it's the logical step being taken by legal American gun owners exercising their Second Amendment rights. To others, a knee-jerk. By those who can't wait to get a slice of weapons history and want to be sure they will have one before the government takeover. Whatever the motivation, sales of AR-15 assault-style weapons are reportedly flying off the shelves of gun stores across America, once again creating the unfounded fear that the precious Second Amendment is on its way to being downgraded or even dumped. And instead of the Orlando shootings being about how to fix what went wrong, it's becoming another rallying cry for those who see this as the traditional slippery slope for the Second Amendment. Let us take this and remind you about your participation on the line. Queue up. Get ready to join us at 1-877-Newsmax, 1-877-639-7629. Start turning the dial. Welcome back. Founder of the Guardian Angels, political activist, co-host of Curtis and Kuby on WABC 77 in New York every weekday from noon to 3 Eastern. And then he comes back at 5 Eastern on WABC on The Drive at 5. I want his agent next time. Let's dig in with Curtis Sliwa. All right, Curtis, let's get right to this here. AR-15s, those types and those type of weapons flying off the shelves. What we heard coming in here, though, the people who've been involved in mass shootings say we have got to do something because we've got to stop losing our children. All right, Curtis, I'm going to open up to you. Where do you want to go on this subject?
Yeah, well, anytime you have this kind of a tragedy, the first thing that people do is they assume, as you rightly pointed out, that the administration is going to take away their firepower. So they go out and they stock up. AR-15s are going for $500. You know, he had a Glock 17 that cost more than the AR-15. It was the AR-15 that did most of the damage. Now, if I say, what do you need an AR-15 for? If you know, just shoot cans and bottles in the desert, or if you're going to go out there and, shoot raccoons with that? And people will say, you can't deny me my right to have an AR-15. I should be able to have a howitzer, Teflon-coated bullets. Hey, chill out. Nobody's taking your guns. We're just saying, slow it down. You don't need this kind of firepower. Who is it that's invading your neighborhood and attempting a home invasion? That would be my first knee-jerk reaction.
All right, but here's what those people will say. And I've been reading this on social media all day long. I've been watching this argument all the time. I've heard exactly what you've said. The people who will want their guns will fire back at you and say, Curtis Sliwa, you can't tell me what to do. I have that right. It's my right. The Second Amendment says it. And of course, we could get into the Second Amendment and talk about exactly what it was meant for, and it was thinking about muskets more than anything else. But how do you answer those people who say, this is my God-given right, Curtis? You can't take it away from me.
Yeah, well, selfish you. This is a country of us and we, not just I and me. And if you have 46, 66, 80, 120 guns in your basement, that's like an armory, right, with the ammunition to boot. You can't justify having it. Say, yeah, but I like to go down every night after work, and I love to smell, the smell of gunpowder and feel and touch those weapons. It's almost psychosexual the way some of these guys get about their guns. They're like total nutnicks when it comes to that. So the bottom line is everybody's got to compromise here just a little bit. Nobody's taking your guns away. Trust me. You're not going to be left with a 38. I got shot 5 times with a 38. I know the damage you can do. Or a 22. You'll still have your firepower when all is said and done.
So then do you disagree with those people who come out and say, and again, between social media, political candidates, commentators, they say there is no doubt in their mind Hillary Clinton will take away the Second Amendment. She will revoke that. That's exactly what she said she's going to do. Do you agree with those people?
That will never happen. You couldn't be more hopelessly wrong. Now, the problem is that we have a divide in this country. In the rural areas, try calling 911. It'll be a month of Sundays before the sheriff gets there. I may need that kind of firepower. In fact, if my family is threatened or my property is threatened. In the suburbs, it's somewhat half and half. In the urban areas, You don't really need that kind of firepower, except if you happen to be living in the middle of Chi-Rock, a.k.a. Chi-Town, Chicago, and all of a sudden the gangster disciples and the Latin kings and the vice lords are laying siege to your property or your business. So we really need to assess each and every case individually. What it is not one size fits all Americans. There are Americans who need this kind of firepower, and then there are other Americans, a simple 22 or a 38 will do.
There's some people I wouldn't want to put a pop gun in their hand or a zip gun because I'd be afraid what they could do when I look at sometimes their mental makeup. 1-877-Newsmax. Charlie in Miami Beach joins us. Charlie, you wanted to talk about the shooter's wife in Orlando who should be charged. Interesting, too, because the feds are still looking at her. She's dropped out of sight, and the grand jury is now looking at whether or not to charge her. Go ahead, Charlie.
Hey, I just found out today and heard that he was apparently supposedly texting her during all this going on, and I absolutely believe she should be charged if she was aiding and abetting him.
Now, let's get to that, Curtis, because as I mentioned, the grand jury is still looking at this right now. Is there any doubt whatsoever? I mean, look, we get the fact that maybe, we don't know, she may have been under duress, but still, you see something, you say something here. She was taken in by the club. She has got to be charged as an accomplice here.
Hey, remember, Gitmo is just about 90 miles away. I think there'll be probably one of those empty cells of some of those Al-Qaeda guys that the president has released back into supposed prison conditions in Saudi Arabia and Yemen and other parts in the Middle East and North Africa. That's where she belongs. She enabled him. She drove him looking for body armor. She drove him in the purchase of ammo. She drove him when he was circling around the disco, the nightclub, casing it out. She had more than enough ample opportunity to drop dime and call 911 and get the police to respond. Instead, we see her with the schmata on her head, and now she's doing mea culpas. I'm going to tell you the whole 9 yards. Hey, too late. $1 short, a day late, lady. Waterboard her and Gitmo. That's what I say.
Let me go to Keith in Lakewood, California at 1-877-Newsmax. Keith, there's a lot of people here who are saying, well, wait a minute. It might have been under duress. Maybe he was forcing her to do things, and she couldn't tell the difference, whatever. You're not buying it, are you, Keith?
No, unfortunately, this goes on all the time. You know, when you have a radical Muslim go and kill a bunch of people, their family knows about it, you know? And
isn't it fair to say, though, hey, Keith, isn't it fair to say, though, that if you have a radical anybody, if you have a murderer, a mass murderer out there, a lot of times there's family members and people who understand and know about it and don't say anything? It's not just Muslims.
Well, no, but unfortunately, most of these acts of terror are done by radical Muslims. And you know what? Let me tell you something else. Back in the 60s, I had a buddy of mine that got into that, and he was about 17 years old. For about 5 years, he went to the mosques and all this. And I didn't run into him for, well, I see him a lot then, but then I didn't see him for a couple of years, and I ran into him, and he was going to a Christian church, and I said, what happened to the mosques and everything? And he said, you know what, the more I got into that, he goes, the more I realized they want to take over the world. And he said, there's a lot of stuff in there that, you know, I just couldn't believe. And he said, finally, I had to get out of it. This was back in the 60s.
It's probably good that he did.
Full of it,
it's
you know,
probably good that he did. Thanks a lot, Keith. We got to move on here. I only got about a minute left here. Curtis, let me ask you, that segues into something very quickly here. There's a lot of talk now. Donald Trump says we need to respectfully go in and start better surveillance of mosques themselves. Is that a slippery slope right there as well?
No. If the imam on the day of prayer, Juma, which is tomorrow, Friday, is giving fiery rhetoric in which he's trying to get these young males to do jihad overseas, why shouldn't an undercover police officer who speaks Arabic or Urdu or Farsi or whatever the language of the mosque is be able to hear it for himself and, if necessary, report back to the authorities? If you're not saying anything inflammatory and hateful towards America or Israel, you got nothing to worry about, muftis, imams, and the rest of you out there.
Got nothing to worry about. And if you do have something to worry about, then let Curtis Sliwa take care of it, at least in the 5 boroughs and in downtown Manhattan, Midtown, that is. Weekday afternoons, noon to 3, and again at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on 77 WABC AM in New York. That's where Curtis Sliwa is. Curtis, always a pleasure, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your time as well. And don't forget, every day when we meet here, 6 o'clock Eastern Time, 3 o'clock Pacific Time, you get to call us at 1-877-Newsmax and be part of the conversation, because you are an important part on the only network that allows the callers to get involved in the issues as well. Rock on, true believers. Thanks for joining us. See you tomorrow night. Good night and good luck.